Aunt Viola Feyling. She was a treasure to all who knew her. With a kind heart and stories of growing up in San Francisco in the 1920s and 30s, living on Bernal Heights, in the Mission, on Corona Heights, roller skating in the streets, crossing the bay by ferry before the bridges were built, swimming at Fleischacker Pool, and most of all, the stories of her large Norwegian-American family, here gathered on their back porch in 1920 to welcome Viola and her twin sister Lillian on their christening day. That's Mama and Papa up on the landing dealing with the little ones. Aunt Vi became my aunt when she married my father's brother, Chris Feyling, right after the war. He was from the old country, but had become a U.S. citizen and had just served in the Navy in the Pacific, while she had been in the Coast Guard. Chris's family were from Egersund, a fishing town on the coast of Norway, and he was one of the youngest in a family of 10 children. Leaving San Francisco and her family was a tearful time for Vi, but she was game to begin her married life on the East Coast, where Chris could start his career as an engineer. Here they are in Boston in front of Chris's brother's house. Finally, they rented their own home in Belmont and began thinking about starting a family. I got to know Aunt Vi when they lived in Massachusetts in 1950, and I was 8 years old. I was immediately smitten. She was so young and lively and friendly that she became my favorite aunt. I think she was everybody's favorite aunt because she took such pleasure in all of her nieces and nephews. Chris and Vi never did have children of their own, but they had many, many godchildren. Here they are visiting in San Francisco with sisters Evelyn and Lillian and her boys John, Norman, and Paul. By then, Chris and Vi had moved to Whittier, California. My cousin Ann Feyling from Massachusetts spent a year living with them in Whittier, and later so did my cousin Ragnhild Feyling from Norway. Vi often came up to San Francisco for visits and family events, like my daughter's christening. Here she's holding Kirsten. Her sister Gladys and husband George are standing on the left. They were the ones who originally welcomed me to San Francisco when I first came here. When Chris passed away, it wasn't long before Aunt Vi moved up to the Bay Area, and we had the opportunity to see her more often. She introduced us to more family members, especially at the annual Uncle Ole picnic at the Sons of Norway compound on Skyline Boulevard, where her father, a master carpenter, had helped build the lodge. Here we met her sister Evelyn and her husband Joe Sones, and their daughter Peaches, and many more, including family friend Arnold Berwick. She made many visits to our house in San Francisco, including holidays with our daughter Kirsten and Vi's niece Judy Logan. And we made many visits to Sunnyview, the retirement home that Judy had found for her. Here she had run into old friends from her childhood. And finally, after years of hearing her stories, I started filming her. I asked about the christening picture.
Oh, that picture.
And where they had lived at that time.
We lived on 200 Anderson Street in Bernal Heights. And my father built the house. It was a two-resident house. It had just a basement apartment, and then it had 2 stories and bedrooms upstairs and big dining room, I remember. And my aunt and my 2 cousins, aunt and uncle, two cousins lived upstairs until Lil and I were born. And then my father built the house that is, one of my cousins lives now in Burlingame. And they moved out and we moved upstairs. So Lil and I were 3 years old when we moved from there. But I had diphtheria while we were there. My mother and I had the diphtheria. And I remember the rooms upstairs. And then I've got pictures of someplace. Lil and I walking along the street on Anderson Street. You could look out the window. And when I was getting over, I was always being sick. And I would be looking out the window on the level floor, the dining room window out on the sidewalk, and could watch the kids play. But I also have pictures of Lil and I when we were about 2 or maybe 3 walking down the street. We were just little kids with the clothes that they wore in the 20s for kids. But so we had, they're there someplace. Okay, we lived on Anderson Street, then we lived on Shotwell or one of those streets. That's where I fractured my skull at that house. We had, our bedrooms were up here and the kids next door were busy playing and I couldn't see what they were doing. And the family was eating breakfast down here. And there was a window here and I got a board so I could look around the corner, and the board tipped. So I hit the clothesline. So all I did was fracture my skull, but I didn't have any bleeding or anything bruised or anything. And so I was in the hospital, at San Francisco Hospital. And I used to say I was there for three weeks and unconscious for 3, unconscious for 3. Anyhow, I made it long. It was 3 hours and 3 days. It wasn't so big. But that was one of my biggies. And then we moved 25th Street, below Shotwell, in that area. And then 25th Street, then we moved out on Terrace. And that's when Lil and I were in kindergarten. So there were a lot of changes in those years in the early 20s. And my father went to Alaska in the summertime, Alaska Packers. He was carpenter boss at the cannery, and they took a ship up, and we would go and see them off, and we'd all cry when they say goodbye and all that. And so we lived on it, and we moved up to Alpine, and Lil and I were in kindergarten when we moved there. And we finished school at McKinley, and then Everett, and then Mission. That's how we got to the Castro, because it was 2 blocks above Castro and 14th. And you've seen it, so you know where it is. Well, that's where we grew up. We would all go to Chinatown. Carl would take us. And we would, some of us would have dates and someone with us would just be all of us. We would go to the restaurant in Chinatown and downstairs, I can't remember the name of it, but we would have this big table and all of us sitting around it. My mother came with us. She always loved this. And my brother would tell the server, the waiter, these are all her children. And it was us, and some of them had their dates, and some of them had their husbands. It's quite a good. They were all her children.
Yeah.
And it was he was a character. You should have really known Carl. He was really the character of the whole bunch of us.
Carl was...
He was 10 years older than me. The three brothers, and then 5 years, and then Mel, and then Red, and then the girls came right away. So Red was stuck with the girls.
Okay.
But these three older brothers were number one. And Carl was the tougher one. Ernie was a accountant type of a guy, and Mel was he was a favorite. He was closer to us in age. Well, they were all favorites, but in different ways. But you know that Mel died when he was 18. He was a very good looking, the best looking one of all of us. And he had a lot of friends, and one 4th of July when he was 18, he was still in high school, his friends decided somebody had a car, they were going to go up Russian River for the 4th of July. So there's a note 4th of July morning from Mel saying that he went with his kids before, they went real early to go up to the river for the day. So anyhow, we went with the folks, and we're coming down the hill, and this car pulls up, and it's Mel's friends, and oh, wait, I was going to tell you, Carl was at I've told this story so many times. Anyhow, he had been in an accident. He'd been hit by a hit-and-run driver and had his leg broken, and he was in the hospital, San Francisco hospital. So these friends of Mel's come driving by, and they said to my mother, "You wanted at the hospital." Carl was still in the hospital, San Francisco hospital. So my mother gets to the hospital, and she says, "Where's Mel?" She knew something had happened there. So sure enough, he had been diving in the river, and he died in shallow water, broke his neck up there. And they took him home on a flat car and a ferry boat, and took him to the hospital. And he lived 24 hours. And my mother was able to be with him. And he was the best looking one of the bunch. He was a very good looking blonde kid. And he used to play cards with us when he had a date. He was 18. And Friday nights we played, like, what's the one? Anyhow, these cards that the kids play. And Old Maid or something. I don't know, one of those where he cheated like crazy, but we all had a lot of fun with him. And he would stay with us after supper for an hour, and then he'd go to the dance. They all went to the Di Malay dances in those days. And so he was a great brother. And Little and I were 10, and so he was 18. And so we lost him. And so that's part of our growing up. But my mother knew. She says, "Where is he?" When she walked in the hospital, she didn't say anything about Carl. She just says, "Where's Mel?" She knew something had happened. He was a good kid. They were a good bunch. He played soccer on a special team. We had a big picture of his team and all that stuff that after growing up we only had that stuff. But I had wonderful brothers. They were all good to us, teased us terribly. And Carl had his older friend, and the teenagers would tease us kids and fool around with us, being nice to us and teasing us and all that. So we were very fortunate to have these older brothers around. And then Red was stuck with the girls, because he was 4 years younger. And so on Saturdays they had we lived near Mission Street, and they had the cereals in those days. And so we got to go to in the afternoon. But the four of us, Red had to go with us. But he would walk across the street. He wouldn't walk with us. and we always had a lot of fun with that. And we really were lucky. We had a good family. We had our squabbles and our problems, and the girls, the older girls were the glamour gals, and Evie and I were the tom girls, and Glad and Lil were the buddies, and Evie and I were the buddies. We went to the library. They got in the back door because Glad knew an usher at the Gastro. So they would go to the show and we would go to the library. But they smoked and we didn't, and we're still here.
Okay.
So that's something to it. I haven't reminisced like this for a long time.
Well, that's fun.
But we did. Our folks, my father had his alcohol problem, and it was not fun. But on the other hand, we didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
We loved to go to Chinatown. My brother Carl worked in Chinatown. They were remodeling a movie, and then Chinese New Year one time. They had the dragon, and they used to throw the money into they had a place that would cash money, and people from the high places and everything would throw the money in. And then at the bank, they would count it on the money counter, all the change. Well, Carl knew everybody, and so he took us into the bank, and we got to watch all of that activity. And then they had firecrackers at the top porches. And they light them up here and they go all the way down. They can't do that anymore. But that was all that excitement. In the olden days of San Francisco, we had a wonderful experience.
After moving up to the Bay Area, Aunt Vi reunited with one of her childhood friends from the olden days, Roger Elder, who had also lost his spouse.
We had been good friends when we were growing up too on Alpine. He would walk me to the store when I had to go get it, and I would see him outside and I would say, "Don't we need any milk, Mom?" So, I always thought he was very special. He was very special. We became very good friends again in our old age.
Roger would drive Aunt Vi up to see us, and we made sure that we had her favorite Dungeness crab for her. Once we thought we'd make it easier on her, and we made a crab risotto. "Where's the crab?" she protested. From then on, we realized only pure cracked crab would do for Aunt Vi. She really loved crab. Once in the car on the way to Sunnyview, we called her and said, "We're coming to get you to bring you home for cracked crab." And she said, "I don't know who you are, but I'll be waiting in the lobby for you." And she was ready to go when we got there. Later, when it was harder for her to leave Sunnyview, we brought the cracked crab down to her. What about, tell us the story about your twin sister and you both married Feylings.
Oh, how did that happen? Well, Red married a Feyling first. He married Erna. The Feyling family went to the other Lutheran church, so we didn't know them as we were growing up. One night before we were going to folk dancing, Carl brought Erna and Russ over to meet us on Alpine. And so that's how we got to know Erna and Russ. And Russ would come once in a while and Erna would come. And then Red and Erna got eyes for each other. And eventually, Russ's eyes couldn't take his eyes off of Bill. And that was back and forth and back and forth. But then I went into the service, and their romance had started developing by that time. So while I was in the service, they got engaged, and then I came home on leave to be in their wedding. So there's pictures of their wedding. And that's the reason I'm in uniform, is because the officer I was working with said I had to be in uniform, which I found out later I didn't have to. But it's history now, so there's where I am sitting there in the uniform. So that's how. And Lil and Russ were perfect. And look at those kids, and Red and Erna and their kids, the three girls, they were perfect.
Here are Pop Feyling and Lena with Red and Erna's girls on their lap, Gudrun, Holly, and Noel, and Russ and Lil's boys on the floor, Norman, Paul, and John. And here are Red and Erna's girls grown up, Gudrun, Holly, and Noel.
And I was wondering, we all wondered, how could Red get such a nice girl as Erna? Because he was our big brother. Well, he was our younger big brother, and he was just Red. He was in ROTC in high school. But anyway, he went to Poly. And the brothers had all gone to Poly, and we all to mission. Poly was a boys' school, according to my mother. But we all wanted to go to Poly, but we didn't get there. But we love mission, so that's okay.
I asked how she ended up marrying Chris.
It was Christmas time, and Chris was coming through San Francisco to catch the ship that he's going to Pacific. He'd already been in the Navy on the East Coast, and being Christmas, and of course he and Russ were good buddies, and he stayed at Lil and Russ's, and he went to all the family things, and so the family story is, there were 3 sisters, Gladden and Ed and Lil. Are there any more like this? You know, Chris and his first personality. Well, no, not home, but we have another one. So he started writing to me when he went to the Pacific. So I was writing to guys that I'd gone to school with too, so that was just, so when he came home, he asked would I come and meet him. So there I am with Evie and my mother. So here we are with all of these sailors in the train station. And so my mother and them go up this way, and Evie and I go this way. So we'll finally go back the other way. There's this guy standing there with them, and he looks at Evie and he looks at me and he says, which one is she? So of course, being Chris, he gives me a big kiss. Well, that was so not that dumb Norwegian, you know, he didn't have anything to do with that. So then he stays with Lil and Russ, and he's part of the family, and he got to know everybody and went to folk dancing group and everything. It was very friendly, very friendly. And so I got to know him. Finally I said, well, if you're going to go back and he had already proposed by then, I said, go back so we can get married and we can, you know, that. So it wasn't very romantic, but it was romantic. So that's how we met. And we lived ever happily ever after. It wasn't romance or anything, but it took. He was a great guy. He was a character, very unique.
The marriage got off to a rocky start, but Vi didn't give up. After several years in Philadelphia and Boston, Chris and Vi moved to Southern California, where Chris had a job as an engineer at the new Lever Brothers factory, the place where he worked until he retired. They bought a home in Whittier and started developing a beautiful garden around it. Chris and Vi made many trips to Norway, to Chris's hometown of Egersund, introducing Vi to his family, and in 1949, going skiing with Chris's brothers and sisters. Vi fit right in with her sisters-in-law. After Chris retired, they downsized to a smaller home nearby in La Mirada, where Chris soon developed a beautiful garden again. He also made longer sojourns to Egersund, staying in his childhood home with brother Wilhelm and wife Evie, and every morning he would join the old-timers, sitting on the old-timers bench in town, right next to the church that his ancestor, Ludwig Feyling, had rebuilt in the 1700s. Chris and Vi also visited the valley where both her parents had grown up, across the fjord from each other and unaware of each other at the time.
That's where my mother's family farm was, and this is Stordal, my father's family farm. Dybdal was up on the top of this mountain.
Vi's parents didn't meet until they both moved with their families to San Francisco. They got married 1 month after the big earthquake in 1906, and the story goes that the reception had to be outside, a long way from the valley where they grew up.
That was the longest fjord in Norway, and this is a typical Norwegian valley. You know, it's flat as a pancake, and there was you got off the boat here, you went all the way back here, and then you went up the mountains. The farm was down here, but you could go up here. The Sather was there, where they took the cows up in the summertime, and they had cabins up there, and we went up there when we were visiting. This is our house in Whittier, on Honeysuckle Lane.
Yeah.
And this was we added this room onto it, and it was just a small little boxy house, poured concrete, so we had a lot of land. And that's the front of the house. And these were our neighbors, and we used to have a progressive dinner. And this night was song titled Outfits On for the dinner that night. We had music and dance. We had a record player that we had a lot of open houses. We were very sociable. This is one of Chris's birthdays. You see what a character he was. Real character. This one too. Somebody gave him a new toilet seat. Well, this is an old friend. This was an old boyfriend who asked me to marry him once. That's Bob. And I said, no, thank you. And then that's his wife. And we were all friends afterwards. He wrote me a letter, sent me a picture of he and his family, his wife and 2 kids. He's the most gorgeous, handsome kid. And over the years, we touched bases here and there. And when we were in Denmark, he went with us to sightsee when one of our friends was with us. And this is another godchild. And oh my gosh. It's funny that you should spot this one. I'd forgotten about it, but I did this for our 40th wedding anniversary.
Can you see what that is?
Oh, yes. This is at Russian River. And this is me and Eddie and Lil. And this is, I think it's Arnold's sister. I have to, I got my little treasures right here. I think that's Millie. Yeah, that's Millie. She's gone. But we were up at Russian River. We went up there one vacation. Millie Berwick and Lil, my twin, Evie, my sister, who's going to celebrate her 75th wedding anniversary next month, and me. And this bathing suit, I didn't buy it, was part of something my mother got from someplace she worked. It was almost 2-piece, but it was joined here, and oh boy. But I think we're just out of high school. 37, yeah. That's when they were seniors in high school. That was our senior year. We went on a vacation to a resort, which was the first time we were there. We always only went. Only vacations we ever had was Uncle Ollie's to cut fruit, and so this was a vacation, and we were 16, 17 years old. So this was really special, and there were dances that we hung around on the outside of, and Eddie was 2 years older, so she was doing things, but Lil got poison ivy on her behind because she went out to the bushes. Oh, it was a wonderful time. But Millie would go for a walk, and we'd never know where she was. And she'd come back, and she was a dreamer, and she just would drift back, and where's Millie? Where's Millie? When she finally showed up. That's the memories I have of that one. But that's Russian River.
That's great.
Gurneyville.
That's fun to hear. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you found a bunch of good stuff.
Yeah.
You had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Well, whatever you want to do with it, do. I don't
Okay.
Vi was proud of her service in the Coast Guard during World War II, and Sunnyview honored very nicely its veterans, with pictures on the walls and a special gathering where each service branch was honored with its song. Vi stood at attention for Semper Paratus, the Coast Guard anthem. Doris and I have such happy memories of our visits with Aunt Vi at Sunnyview, and so does our daughter Kirsten. When Vi couldn't digest crab anymore, we switched to shrimp, until eventually even that was too much for her. Her niece Judy Logan was like a daughter to Aunt Vi, helping out all the time with doctor's appointments, celebrating birthdays, even arranging for financial assistance when Vi needed it to stay at Sunnyview. My cousin Ragnhild from Norway and my sister Christine from Florida visited when they came for Kirsten's wedding. By then, Vi couldn't easily leave Sunnyview, so after the wedding, Kirsten and Matt came and presented her with a bridal bouquet. A year later, she recorded a greeting for them.
I am so proud that you wanted to name your twins after me. And I'm so sorry for you that you're going to have boys. I knew boy twins, but Lil and I had a great time. My sister's name was Lillian. And we were fairly normal, I think. We had a great time together and a lot of friends, and we got along fine as being twins, and all it was great. And I always loved being a twin. So I'm so happy for you, and thank you for thinking of me. I was so thrilled when I saw that. Wow. Thank you for thinking of me. I really appreciate it.
Lillian and Viola remained close all their lives and traveled together and celebrated birthdays together and supported each other up until Lillian died in 1996. Vi lived for all the visitors who came to see her, and especially loved the little ones, and of course her favorite nieces and nephews like Judy Logan, Paul B. Feyling, Mel Gregory and his wife Carmel. When Vi couldn't make it anymore to the Uncle Ole 4th of July picnic, she wanted to see pictures of all who were there, including her sister Lil's son, John Feyling, and his son, Chris, and the grandkids. Vi eagerly sent a personal greeting to everyone.
So happy to see all of you. I wish I could see you, all of you, but I'm too old. But I love you all, and I remember you all, and thank you for being you, and I love you, and have a good time.
How could you use a poor maiden so? A poor maiden so. How could you use a poor maiden so? A poor maiden so.
Looking at the sun all day, and the whole cock thing. Every night I sing that one. That gets me started on the winter song.
As we go along.
Her sister Evelyn's granddaughters, Molly and Maren, came for the Christmas party at Sunnyview.
I'm the family.
a rough ride, huh?
Yeah, the accident. Someone got hit.
I was worried about you.
I know. We drove safely, but we can't speak for the
knew
other
you would.
people.
I thought, well, you're smart enough. If it was bad, you wouldn't come.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was fine.
I'm just old. My body is old.
94 years, it served you pretty well.
You know, when I think of being 94, that's crazy. And when my mind goes swinging around, please God, I don't need to stay here any longer. But you're not through with me. Yes, thank you, but I don't think there's anything more I can do. Please, it's not necessary anymore. But then I wake up and then I get out here and I read a good book and then you walk in. So it's necessary.